Hello and welcome to Scribes and Songsters, crime chronicles in Windsor and chronicling a family's journey from slavery. We're starting the show with crime. I'm Veronique Mandel. Well, my first guest is Windsor author Ed Gagnon. Ed is a retired police officer who now spends part of his retirement time writing crime novels that, for the most part, are set right here in Windsor. Ed has published 8 novels to date, and today we're going to find out about his last 2, Border City Chronicles and 4. Welcome to Scribes and Songsters.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
How are you?
Good.
Excellent. So before we get into your books, which I have to say I really enjoyed, and particularly because they're very local, where'd you grow up?
In Windsor. I was born in McGregor, just outside of Windsor, and moved into the city when I was 4 years old, and went to school east side of town in Herman High School and Windsor Police Force.
So when did you go to the police?
About a month before my 19th birthday. So I was pretty young.
Yeah.
I was 18 years old, just turning 19, and spent a couple of years as a cadet, and then moved up after that.
How long did you spend on the force?
31 and a half years.
Whole lifetime.
And I don't miss it.
So when did you start writing? I mean, at what point did you decide that you were going to write? I mean, did you write when you were in high school and that sort of thing?
I dabbled a bit in poetry at grade school, but I never really thought about writing, especially for what I'm doing now. But when I retired, I took to traveling the world for a couple of years, and it was before Facebook. And I sent back emails, snippets of my adventures to my friends and family. And everybody loved my little stories. And, when I got home, everybody said you should put them into a book. So that's what I did. My first book was A Casual Traveler, which became 44 short stories from different places around the world. Okay,
so let's stop here for a sec. Around the world, I mean, that is a gigantic statement. Where'd you go?
The first year, immediately after I retired, I went to Southeast Asia, and I did Cambodia, Vietnam, and Thailand. And that was about 2 months. And then
Why?
Different reasons, something completely different. I enjoy meeting different people, experiencing different cultures. Had a friend there who was living in Cambodia, so he was able to help me get my Asian sea legs, or get used to the country there, and just wanted to experience everything, something different.
So let's get to 4, because time goes so quickly, and you've got so many interesting things here. Tell me about 4.
I'm always looking to broaden my horizons. I wanted to do something different than the crime fiction I'd been writing, and I had a personal experience of seeing something strange in the sky that I couldn't explain.
Can't wait to hear it.
Just star watching. We were up north and sitting around a campfire, and hadn't had more than a couple of drinks at that point. And we thought we saw a shooting star, but it stopped and it changed directions, and it went up and down and sideways, and then went back the way it came. And everybody assumed it was a satellite, or it was this or was that. And I said, no, who knows? I don't know. It wasn't a star, and it wasn't a satellite. It was unidentified. Yeah. And it was up there and just took off. And
you know what you saw?
Yeah.
Okay, 4.
Yeah, so it piqued my curiosity, and I've always been fascinated with the pyramids. And we traveled to Egypt last winter, and heard more things and read more things about the pyramids, and did some research in between. I wanted to tie it all in together with the unknown, the unexplained. There's so much about the pyramids that we don't know today. So.
Give us just a quick summary of what this is about.
There's 4 different men from different parts of the world, and they're all drawn to the Great Pyramid in Egypt, and they don't know why. And they meet there, and it turns out that they all have the same birth date.
I loved how they talked about it, our birthday.
Yeah, yeah. So the one fellow's in Detroit, up in Michigan, and with his son, and his son is listening to these fantastic stories from these other gentlemen, and his whole belief system is changing throughout the night, and then he sees they all experience something, and without giving away the plot, it ties in again to their experience at the pyramids with what's happening in the skies over northern Michigan. So.
And it changes something in him at the end, doesn't it?
Yeah. He comes to have his own understanding of what else is out there, that we're not alone.
And speaking of that, what do you believe?
I'm open-minded. I always have been. I can't believe in this vast universe and the other universes that are out there that there aren't some other forms of life out there. Whether they visited here or had something to do with the pyramids, I have no idea. But I am open-minded about it all.
It really is. I mean, some of the stuff in here is really extraordinary. I thought one of the things that really sort of blew me away was how, there were so many parts of the world with pyramids that you don't think about.
When I started researching, I couldn't believe it. The countries that have pyramids, and China, if I get back to China, they're just finding these or discovering these pyramids because they don't brag to people. They don't allow people to visit them. So nobody else really knew what was there. I think until the Second World War, they discovered one of the ones in China. Another underwater one near Portugal, where they figure it might be the lost city of Atlantis.
Yeah.
They're all over the world.
And I know that there are researchers now who are sort of posing those questions. How is it that shape is all over the world?
And all built around the same time.
Yeah.
With people who couldn't communicate.
Yeah, no kidding, eh? And with no technology.
Yeah.
Now, your other book, Border City Chronicles. What inspired this? Your career?
Yes, I try to base all my stories and characters on events I've been involved in or on the sidelines and people I've met over the years. And I usually have a list of different stories I want to write. And there was those 3 stories were just ideas, and I didn't really think I could make a full-length novel out of them. And I've seen other authors, the big ones like Patterson, starting to do short stories, collections of short stories, for somebody who want a little bit different, doesn't want to get into a full-length novel. Maybe they just read one quick story before they go to bed. So I thought I'd try it, and I had the ideas there, and just worked at each story individually and put the 3 of them together in a book about the size of a novel.
So tell us what's in here without giving a lot away.
The 3 short stories. The first one is it's from Windsor. It's about a missing baby out on the west end of Windsor, which was a big thing at the time and a big thing with the media. Basically, 2 kids who had a kid, and there was all kinds of misconception and things that went wrong in the investigation and with the couple that they're trying to investigate.
I covered that story.
Oh, we did? Okay, well, then you probably know more than I do.
And no, it was a long time ago.
Yeah, it was. And my second story I was more involved in, it was about a dangerous offender from Windsor, from Juilliard Road area, who I did have, who I arrested 3 different times. And then I was always frustrated. When I first ran into him, he was a convicted murderer, and he was out on parole. And he had conditions not to associate with other known criminals, or, not to do drugs, or, be in licensed premises, that kind of thing. And every time I saw him, he was breaching his parole. So I just lock him up and figured he's going to go back to prison. But then next week he'd be out again. So, I went through that nonsense a few times. And a couple of years down the road, then he murdered his girlfriend. So
grim.
Yeah. And story number 3 served a couple of purposes. I wanted to introduce a new character, which is going to be in my sequel to my other book. I don't think it's up to, it's Finding Hope. It's about the missing and murdered Aboriginal women out west along the Highway of Tears.
Right.
That was my bestseller, and my fans really liked it, and they thought I should continue because I left an open ending. So what I did with the third story in Border City Chronicles, it's in Detroit. Well, there has been some different serial killers over the years. So in this one here, my female detective, a new character that I want to introduce, is going to be in the sequel to Finding Hope. So I can tie. I love doing crossovers between my books with characters sometimes, or other books. Yeah.
Now your character. Norm?
Right.
Tell us about him.
That's based on myself in my own career.
I wondered if it was.
My middle name is Norm, and one time one of my nicknames was Storm and Norman. So I looked at Norm Storm, Norm Strom. It just came together and became my name. And I wanted a protagonist that wasn't a superhero. He didn't have all these magical powers. He wasn't shooting up and getting shot at every episode or every book, that kind of thing. I just wanted, a cop that was out there doing his job, trying to do good, helping people, and maybe add a little bit of humor to it and mix it up with some of the characters that he's involved in.
Because he was a very interesting character.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think I had an interesting career. I mean, I had a lot of fun on the job. I enjoyed my career when I was there. Worked in all kinds of different areas, and met lots of great people. always tried to think outside the box. So I did some different projects and things over the years where instead of just doing reactive policing, I tried to be more proactive in my approach. But, you're limited as to what division you're working in or where they send you, what job they assign you, and you just kind of do what they want you to do a lot of times.
When he's making decisions, are they based on the kinds of decisions you would have made?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Are there any characters you've written into your work that you didn't like?
One of the police chiefs. I think I spelled that out in my first book. A couple of my buddies said that was kind of my FU book to the department. but no, not totally. I mean, there were certain informants that I didn't care for either because of who they were. But you dealt with them. They made the world go around. I was the reason for writing Rat. My first crime fiction book was all the different informants. I wanted to tell their stories because you read about these big busts in the newspaper, these drug investigations and stuff, and a lot of it is information from informants. They turn the wheels. Yeah.
How much time do you spend writing?
On and off. I spend quite a bit when I'm in somewhere south, hanging around a pool or something in the wintertime. This summer I went in spurts. Depends if I'm doing shows or doing promotions, or I've been trying to write query letters looking for agents or publishers, that sort of thing. I go in spurts. It's not something where I am retired. It's a hobby for me, so I don't have to spend so many hours a day writing. My wife will know sometimes if she walks into the room and, you're writing, she knows it's time to turn around and give me some space because I'm in the groove. I've got some ideas. I got to get them down on paper, bang off a few chapters. And then like now I probably haven't written anything in a couple of weeks because I did a lot of Christmas shows. But I'll get back at it probably this coming month. Yeah.
Where can people find your work?
I have all of my books at two Windsor stores, Juniper Books on Ottawa Street or PB Books on Tecumseh Road at, I think it's Leonard is the cross street. They're all on Amazon or on the other sites, Kobo or iTunes. There's ebooks online too, or the paperbacks.
It's wonderful. Thank you so much and good luck.
All right. Thanks for having me.
Look forward to your next one.
Okay.
Coming up, we'll meet a Windsor man who is preserving his family's history and telling us about it in interesting ways. We'll hear from him right after this. Welcome back. Well, I'm delighted to have Teajai Travis here with me in the studio. In 2019, Teajai won a City of Windsor Arts, Culture and Heritage Fund grant to help him preserve his family history. Teajai's ancestors survived slavery in the United States, and now he's going to turn his family's road to freedom into a novel, a book of poetry and a one-man play. Welcome to Scribes and Songsters. I'm delighted to have you here.
Thank you for having me. This is great.
So now I'm going to talk about this incredible project you've started, but tell me a little bit about you. Where did you grow up?
God, I was born and raised in Sandwich Town.
Wow.
Lived most of my life in Sandwich Town. I didn't have to leave, the boundaries of Sandwich Town until I was, into my adulthood. But I went to school there, elementary school. High school. The high school I went to is not there anymore, Forster Secondary.
Isn't it weird when the schools you went to get torn down? I hated that.
Well, half my neighborhood got torn down.
Yeah. Oh.
So many of the houses were bought up by a bridge company and boarded up. So in my time being in that community, I've seen my elementary school close down, the high school close down. We watched the bank leave the neighborhood, the grocery store leave the neighborhood, the neighborhoods that you played in, the houses that your friends lived in.
It sounds like poetry coming, the way you're telling this.
Yeah.
But it's sort of tragic, isn't it?
It is tragic.
Yeah.
It's very tragic.
Now, what about your career path? What led you to this?
I want to say I've always been a creative person, but some folks might say, "Oh, that young boy is kind of strange." He's kind of strange a little bit. But when I was in the second grade, and I'm not sure how or for what reason, I was given this scholarship to practice art at Mackenzie Hall, and it was myself and another young girl my age, and we would leave for a couple hours a day, and we would go to Mackenzie Hall, and we would study with an artist. And I have no idea what this artist's name is, why we were studying with him, but we learned so many things. And what was most important is we learned how to express ideas. So I was the kind of kid who would go into the bank with a parent and grab one of the pamphlets and say, once upon a time, we were walking around in a bank and we were doing this, and I'd be sitting inside the line at the bank, sharing these stories with people. And folks would always say, one day you're going to be a storyteller. And then one day I woke up and I was like, oh, I'm telling stories. Like it happened, right?
Isn't life interesting?
Life is too interesting.
Yeah. So what made you decide to take this look back at your ancestors?
Curiosity. Growing up in my family, there was always these big, beautiful, heroic stories. Like the folklore stories that hang around your families. And at one point, I got curious enough to go and see if there's any truth to these stories. And I like to travel. I like to be on the road. So I got in my car in maybe 2016 or 2017, and I drove to Virginia. And I drove to Virginia because a few years prior to that, I did some genealogy, and they traced my family back to Virginia, 1745. I had no clue where I was going, what direction I was taking. I just knew that I can find the state of Virginia and then take it from there.
So what happened when you got to Virginia?
I got lost. I met lots of people. I showed up in maybe the wrong place, but maybe the right place. I ended up in Jamestown. And what I found in Jamestown, I was like, Jamestown is like Sandwich Town. But the people in Jamestown, they don't know Sandwich Town. And I'm not sure if the people in Sandwich Town know anything about Jamestown, but there's these histories that exist there. And I always say Sandwich Town could be fenced in and you could pay an admission to go in. There's so much like living, breathing history there. And in Jamestown in Virginia, they've really capitalized on that by telling stories. And I thought, wow, this would be so great if Sandwich Town could do this sort of thing. And at that point, I'm even more curious and even more motivated about doing this history. So I brought that experience home with me, and I mean, I write poetry and I do performance poetry. So I figured I could share these stories on stage.
So what did you find there?
In Jamestown?
The first ancestor. I mean, how did you, start to get all that information?
Oh, well, this happened the next time around, the second time around. The first time around, I referred to as like a pilgrimage of sorts. It was me and my drum, and we were like just in the space where we knew that our ancestors were. The second time around...
So you took a drum with you?
Yeah. I always take a drum with me. There's always a drum with me. There's a drum in my car right now.
How cool.
Yeah. Yeah. So the second time around, it was a bit more organized because I was traveling with somebody who's a journalist and knows how to set up interviews and locate, the places where you're going to, find your treasure trove of content. So we went to Mercer County, Pennsylvania. Now, the interesting thing about Mercer County in Pennsylvania is that my oldest known ancestor founded a free settlement there, like a free black settlement there, in maybe 1820 or so. It's either between 1811 or 1820, but there's this big beautiful story about this settlement that was known as Liberia at that time, and the town around it, they know the story well. I didn't know the story that well. My family doesn't know that story well. And when we went to their museum and I got to speak with the president of their historic society, he shared with me that I was the first person, carrying the last name Travis to have been in that space since my ancestors left in probably 1853 or so.
What did that make you feel like?
It was amazing. It was mind-blowingly amazing. And not just that I was the first person to travel there in some time, but that there was all of this research there's all of these people that have been researching my family, and my family's outside the loop, and I'm outside the loop, and now we're in the loop. You know, I can say I was in Mercer County, and I went to the museum, and I spoke to the folks at the Historic Society, and they have like a wall that's dedicated to our family's history. It's amazing, you know, pictures, records, the deed to the land, you know, more details about the amount of land that was owned by my ancestors at that time. Now, anybody that's familiar with the town of Stoneboro in Mercer County, Pennsylvania, that whole town was once owned by my ancestors. Now, in the documents that I received, it said that Richard Travis Sr., who's my oldest known ancestor, purchased 150 acres of land for $2. But he owned 800 acres of land by the time they pick up and left.
It's gobsmacking, isn't it?
It is. It's gobsmacking. Absolutely.
How long were you there?
Like the whole trip was about a week. So we spent maybe 2.5 days in Pennsylvania, 2.5 days in Virginia, and then the travel back and forth.
So you get back, and then you've got all of this incredible information. What do you do with it?
Right. You know, as a person that writes creatively, I'm trying to find a way to do justice to those voices. Because when you really start to get into the records, at least this has been in my experience, there's not a lot there to paint the whole picture. You know, like I had access to a will and testament, the land deeds, and then there's, you know, the folklore, you know, the things that may or may not have happened.
I want to talk about the rest of the project, but how about reading for us just a little bit?
Yeah, sure. This is the intro to one of the live presentations that I did back in May. His name was Richard. He was born enslaved upon a plantation in Virginia in 1745. His connection to his mother, lost in time. His family's roots in Mississippi, lost in time. His first memory, lost in time. His story swallowed by time, buried in earth, covered by the debris of his story. The coward's victory lap. You better run. You better run, you better run, you better run, out of sight, out of mind, out of time, out of time, out of time, disappear with the moon, return to runaway stars, bite your tongue, hold your breath, don't blink an eye. Remove your feet, extend your wings, close your mind, open your ribcage, activate your heart, and use your wings. His son pulled his decomposing memory from the earth, bathed him in future, collected his dust in see-through glass jars with no lid, carried him across water beneath star-lit skies. Their tongues dancing black magic with shadows hiding behind trees. The depth of their forest transformed into digital platforms for anti-human downloads. The water doesn't wave no more. The wind will not swing to the melody of freedom. He is reborn into the illusion of freedom, blood-stained teeth and broken lips. Behind the nightmare of eyelids, he is planted into the soiled bottom of a castaway wishing well. He is wished well in death. He is sentenced to life. In life, he is tied to the trauma of his descendants. He was born in an invisible cage made of sky and earth, ripped from his mother's ship, feet first. He abandoned a blood shadow on a pile of lies inherited by his master, tied together in red and yellow knots of hair, whispered stories of dark age tales of hunger, disease, and death. The walls of the sky drip tears upon clouds that move too slow. Slave hands, baptized in old storms, lost in time. His tongue is spread upon the old walls that haunt the heart of the American freedom. His song echoes.
It's really beautiful.
Thank you.
It's magical. So now that's the poetry, the live presentations, but you're also doing other things with it.
Yes.
So tell us about that.
Yeah, The intention of doing all of this work in the first place was so that the generations coming after me will have access to this content and have that direct connection to their ancestry. So the plan is to put all of this information into a book. But for me, as an artist, the the book doesn't have the same power as a live performance, in the tradition of oral history, being able to pass these stories down. So the novel that would come out of the project, it comes third to the theatric and to the written poetry of the of this particular story. This link to ancestry.
What does your family think of this?
I think they're probably pretty excited.
Yeah.
There's like when I started to learn about this history, I was asking my aunts and my uncles lots of questions, and I think I became like a pain in the butt a little bit, just asking too much. You're asking too much. I was showing up at my family that still presently live in North Buxton. Tell me stories about your mother and your grandfather. I want to know everything. And sometimes they didn't have access to the stories. There's content here that nobody in my family has had access to in a long time, to the extent that they didn't know the family was in Virginia, and they didn't know the amazing story of Richard Travis Sr. and what brought us into Canada and what settled our family in North Buxton.
Well, I am so looking forward to keeping abreast of where this project takes you. I really thank you so much for telling us about it. It's quite extraordinary.
Thank you. It's been great. I hope to see you in the audience one day.
You will.
Yeah.
Thank you. Well, as always, there is never enough time. And I want to heartily thank my guests at Gagnon and Teajai Travis. Thank you to producers Brian Sweet and Gary Glass. Huge thanks to Tony Toldo and the Toldo Foundation and Neil and Tina Queering. We're most grateful. But of course, as always, the biggest thanks is to you for watching. See you next time, I hope, here on Scribes and Songsters. I'm Veronique Mandel.